I'm Hallie Jackson with a breaking news special report. Donald Trump on trial with maybe just 2 days left till the jury gets this case. We're hearing in the last hour the closing arguments could begin as soon as Tuesday. After a pretty testy day in court, raised voices, intense questions, and one thing those 12 jurors are going to have to consider. Do you believe Michael Cohen? Because that's the crux of this whole cross-examination of the prosecution's star witness. Really, this whole trial with the defense only needing to convince just one person on this jury that Michael Cohen undercut his own testimony. That Donald Trump's former right-hand man lied, and lied some more with little to lose. He's going to be back on the stand Monday, and the judge is telling both sides, get ready to wrap it all up. Things got pretty spicy today. Blanche, at one point, Todd Blanche, the former president's lead defense attorney, shouting that was a lie when asking about an October 2016 phone call to Mr. Trump's bodyguard. This was a really key moment, folks. Cohen stood by his story, saying that he talked to Mr. Trump on the phone about Stormy Daniels during the call and didn't just talk about prank calls from a teenager. We're going to get into that in a sec. Remember, that call and calls like it are key because Cohen is the only person who can directly implicate Mr. Trump in this alleged scheme. In plain English, he's the guy who can connect the dots back to that so-called hush money payment, that $130,000 to Stormy Daniels for her silence about an affair the former president denies. This is the centerpiece of what prosecutors have described as this election interference scheme. Most of the day was spent hitting at Cohen's credibility, painting him as somebody out for revenge. Asked if he was angling for a job like chief of staff, Cohen said, that was for my ego, yes. Asked point blank, does the outcome of this trial affect you personally? Michael Cohen said, yes. All of it playing out in front of more than a dozen Republican allies of Mr. Trump who showed up in person. You see some of them here. And check this out. Look at this line outside court. You see it stretching all the way back. Our team says the person at the front of that line paid $1,800 to start sitting there Tuesday night so they could get a seat inside. We'll say it again. New York's hottest club is a downtown Manhattan courtroom. We're going to get into that later on. But first, we're taking you inside all those rooms cameras cannot be in for every key element coming out of court, what it means, why it matters, and most importantly now, what is coming next. Our team of reporters and legal and political experts is ready to break it all down. We want to start with Rahima Ellis, who's live for us outside court. What's interesting here, Rahima, is we seem to be barreling towards the finish here. Closing arguments may be starting as early as Tuesday, but one of our colleagues, Tom Winter, hears that there's a potential witness for the defense who says he'll be around next week if they need him, right?
Yeah, that's what Tom Winter is telling us. And this person, we're told, his name is Robert Costello. He's a lawyer also. And he, according to Michael Cohen's testimony, he was relaying messages via Rudy Giuliani, who was President Trump's attorney, from Trump to Rudy Giuliani to Costello to Cohen about don't worry. And this was after Michael Cohen's apartment was raided by the FBI in 2018. They took his phones and they took material from his office. And the message from that Cohen is saying he got from Costello, sleep well tonight, you have friends in high places. And Cohen went on to say that he got messages via Costello, via Rudy Giuliani coming from Trump. And that was to say, stay in the fold, don't flip, don't speak. Now, might he be called as a witness for the defense? And that is to do what? To say that Michael Cohen is a liar, something that they've been saying all day, that they've been trying to get Michael Cohen to basically rebut his own statements of that he is essentially a serial liar. So could this be one more time that he's lying? We don't know yet whether or not Robert Costello will be called, but the defense has seemingly leaving that door open for the possibility that he would be called. We should say that the defense is also leaving the door open that there's a possibility that the former president, Donald Trump, might also be called. Hallie?
Rahima, talk a little bit more about this critical phone call that was the crux of what happened right before the lunch break, and things started to get a little bit explosive. It was one of the rare times that we've heard Todd Blanche raise his voice, according to our colleagues who were there in court and in the overflow room, seemingly to try to signal to the jury, you know, vocally, this is something important. Like, this is an important moment here as he's pressing Michael Cohen about this very specific call, whether it was a discussion with the former president's bodyguard about prank calls from a 14-year-old or whether it was about Stormy Daniels.
Yeah, and I'm going to show you a full screen here in just a second, because the defense seems to be resting on the notion that Donald Trump didn't know anything about this. In fact, they have pled not guilty to all of these 34 counts against them about falsifying records and conspiracy. So here's the full screen of it saying, from Blanche, the defense attorney, do you agree with me that when you pled guilty of a crime and you are lying, that's not accepting responsibility for it? And Michael Cohen saying, I accepted responsibility and I'm suffering the consequences of it. Again, they're trying to get Michael Cohen, basically their defense is that he was doing this in order to please the boss so that he could be in good favor with the boss. And he was acting on his own, not necessarily acting on the orders from Donald Trump. Hallie?
Rahima Ellis, thank you very much. I want to bring in our legal experts now. Danny Savalos, Debbie Hines is joining us as well. Debbie, I'll start with you. Thank you for being here in Washington. As a prosecutor watching this cross-examination go down today, would you be sweating it out a bit that the jury now has all weekend, the next 3 days, to marinate on what they just heard? These questions of credibility about Michael Cohen, the repeated instances where he acknowledged lying.
Not really. And
Okay.
here's the reason. This jury has been sitting on this trial 4 out of the 5 days a week. They have other things to do on the weekend. They have their own real lives. So, yes, they're going to think about it, but I don't think they're going to be marinating over it because they're just going to be going on. Now, it would be different if this were the closing argument and then you send them out for the weekend and they have all weekend to think about that, but I don't think so for cross-examination.
I want to come back to that point in a second when we talk about timeline, because that may, in fact, be the reality here. But before we get there, Danny, to you, you've talked about how the goal of a cross-examination is not supposed to be about breaking people down. It's about getting concessions. In your view, did Todd Blanche get enough of those to put some of those, you know, worms of doubt into the minds of the jury?
He did, but he might have been able to do it in a more efficient way. There were a couple moments today that were good for the defense, but there were a lot of moments that felt kind of plodding. And the challenge for the cross-examiner, and really it's tough for me to criticize because I fall victim to this too, when you have so much material, it's hard to organize it, and it's hard to know when enough is enough. As a cross-examining attorney, you want to expose every lie this person has ever told, because to you, it's relevant, and the jury might think it's relevant too. But it's really hard to edit. And sometimes you have to say, well, I might be able to get him on this issue, but I'll leave it out. Or when Todd Blanche would have Michael Cohen on the hook and Cohen would fight back on admitting something was true or not, then sometimes it's time to move on. Other times it's time to hammer down on an issue. It's really hard to know. And look, as an attorney, you just don't want to leave anything out there. So I'm guilty of this, too. I tend to keep going and keep pushing an issue, maybe beyond when I should have.
As a news anchor, I can sometimes relate to not stopping talking when perhaps maybe I should. Debbie, to you here, the prosecution is going to get a chance to do a redirect here. So in other words, they're going to get a chance to try to reset a bit of the narrative that the defense, that Todd Blanche has just tried to lay out over the course of the last however many hours, 2 days, with Michael Cohen. What do they need to do? What's going to be their goal?
I think their only goal really is to focus in on the important things. I mean, Todd Blanche went through, like, what is it, a day and a half over lies? I mean, how many ways can you spell liar, you know?
Well, that phone call discussion seemed to be fairly damning.
The phone call is where I think they will hammer in, definitely with that, but not all the previous, you know, you told this or you said that. And definitely, I don't think even on the recordings, even though, yes, it's unethical to record your own client, but I think that phone call was, I mean, my ears perked up when I heard that, and I think that's where they have to go back and really basically build him up, build Cohen up again, so that the jury is not left with the impression that, did he talk to Donald Trump or did he talk to the bodyguard? He was calling the bodyguard's phone number. Why do we know he was talking to Donald Trump and not to the bodyguard? They really have to build that back up because that's a key element of their case.
Danny, do you think, and I know this is a bit of tea leaf speculation here, we are not in the minds of the jury, we don't know what they're thinking, but do you believe, based on what you heard in court today from the notes inside, that the defense did an effective job in raising questions about Cohen's own testimony with what he said today?
They did. But in many ways, a lot of the stuff they hit on were things we knew they were going to hit on. We knew that Cohen was a liar. We knew that Cohen has a checkered past. We knew that Cohen has a motive, and that motive is revenge. So that was all going to come out. But at times, the cross-examination probably wasn't as tight as it could have been. And when you leave a witness, a hostile witness, on the stand longer than you should and ask that one additional question, you really run the risk that that witness is going to zing you. Because remember, that's what Michael Cohen is trying to do with every single question.
So what should the defense do next, Danny? Do you believe that they should call another witness like Bob Costello, let's say? Do you believe that we are headed toward closings maybe as soon as Monday? For sure, it sounds like Tuesday based on what the judge has laid out.
I tend to be very risk averse, so I might not call any witnesses at all, especially if at most I was only thinking of calling one witness. I would rather just rest unless I really needed something out of Robert Costello or some other witness. I would tend to lean towards just resting and then arguing that we didn't call any witnesses essentially because we don't have the burden and they have the burden and they didn't meet it. We had to sit there and listen to it the whole time and they haven't proven their case.
Debbie, to you, because this gets back to something that we talked about right at the top of this discussion. It is entirely possible, and again, we're like tiptoeing to the world of hypotheticals here, but it's possible that the jury gets this case. Court is not scheduled to be in session on Wednesday, and then in the midst of deliberations, they take this perhaps, potentially, break. Kind of in the middle of the week. Is that damaging to either side, or is that simply the reality when there are such things as weekends and federal holidays that line up with these kind of proceedings?
That is the one thing that concerns me for both sides, or more so for the prosecution, because I don't recall having, and I've tried hundreds of cases, I don't recall having a situation where once we got to closing argument that it was kind of chopped up. We have the closing here. I mean, I just think that's very problematic. Most cases, they run very smoothly. You start with closing, you do the prosecutor, you do the defense, prosecution does rebuttal, and because this is New York, then the jury instructions is set forth to the jury, and then they go out to deliberate. So I just see that as potentially, you know, breaking up, and I just usually that does not happen, and in a case this important, it should not occur.
Debbie, thank you so much. Debbie Hines, Danny Savalos, we're glad to have you both with us. Appreciate it. I want to bring in somebody else who is, in some ways, a legal analyst who has an inside look at the defendant in this case, Mr. Trump's former attorney, one of them, Michael Vanderveen. Thank you very much for being with us here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so based on the conversation we were just having with our NBC News legal analyst, do you think that the defense should wrap it up here? Leave it on this note, leave the jury with what they heard from Michael Cohen and this cross-examination by Todd Blanche?
I think it depends a little bit about what happens with the redirect. I think they'll redirect. There'll be probably limited cross to that redirect. And it depends upon what the judge's ruling is with respect to the expert they want to call. In pretrial motions in the case, they had been saying they wanted to call an expert in election law, election finance law, and it was really tailored very narrowly by the judge in his rulings as to what this witness could say. They would like to get that witness in and kind of open the barn door on what he can say because, you know, you ask an election finance expert, you know, it's kind of wishy-washy, you know, well, under this circumstance it could be, maybe under this circumstance it's not illegal. So it would be a strong witness for them, you want to put everything in, you know, once the game's over, you're not going to be able to come back and play again.
Yeah, you want to leave it on the field.
I think they've had a very strategic, well-thought-out defense in this case, and I think they're going to be best off just to stick to it.
What about the former president himself? You, of all people, know he likes to see an aggressive defense. He likes his people to be aggressive on his behalf. Did Todd Blanche, in your view, pass that test?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, you can tell because at the end, when he came out of court, he thanked his lawyers. So that means he's real happy with them. And he even talked about paying them and really not regretting it so much. So I think he's really happy.
He did say he'd prefer not to pay him quite so much money.
Well, that's not just him. But, you know, I think they had a strong day. I think that in the room, they felt like they had the day. You know, when you saw Todd Blanche come out afterwards, he was light. He was bouncing around. He was laughing. He was smiling. He felt good about it. From what I was reading on the screens today, it seemed like he had a really good rhythm. There weren't a lot of objections interrupting him, and Cross is very much rhythmic. It's like music to a certain extent.
But what about Danny's point that they could have been a little bit more efficient, that it could have felt a little tighter for a jury? Because listen, you and I are steeped in this stuff, right? I mean, you follow this, I follow that. The jury's following it, but they haven't been following it for 8 years, for 6 years.
Well, I've done a lot of cross-examinations, and in your head, it's going the way you think it's going. But, you know, sometimes it gets a little rough because you're really reacting to what the answers are. And in your cross, you know, there are 3 ways you can go, at least. And it really depends upon what's happening in that interaction. So, I really thought it was a pretty smooth cross-examination, and it's really tough to second-guess the guy who's asking the questions.
Well, one of the things he's doing is he's leaving the door open potentially to the possibility of maybe, and I'm using a lot of caveat words, of maybe having Mr. Trump testify. The vibe we're getting is that is very unlikely to happen. If you were in that position, with all of the risks, Michael, that it would entail to put Donald Trump on the stand, would you do it? Would you not? Is he going to steamroll you either way, depending on what he wants to do?
First of all, I don't think it's so unlikely that he testifies, frankly. I think his lawyers will be telling him.
And opens himself up to a cross-examination from the prosecution?
I think his lawyers are going to be saying to him, hey, we're doing real well here. I think we got daylight. I think this could be a not guilty. But he's gnawing at the bit to testify. That's just another place for him to be at the podium and giving election talk. I mean, he wants
to... a way riskier place, of course.
Sure, but
when he's at a campaign rally, nobody's interrupting him. Nobody's pushing back and questioning him.
He's been a risk taker his entire life. I mean, I think he's gnawing at the bit to testify. I think he wants the opportunity to defend himself, and I think he knows he won't have that chance again. He testified in the civil trial, of course. And I know that he would like to if he could.
This is now if my math is correct, third day in a row this week he's had Republican allies in court with him. What do you think it does for him to have those folks sitting behind him?
Oh, I think it makes him feel great. I think it makes it justifies to him that it's his defense. It justifies to him that this is, in his words, a sham prosecution. And I think it makes him feel much more comfortable all throughout the day that he's got supporters there. And that's not just him. That's any defendant, When you try cases and you're sitting there with just the lawyers and nobody else, it's good to be able to look back and see your family there or your friends there or your supporters there. And I think it's been very helpful for him, probably. What the public perception is, or the jury's, more importantly, the jury's perception is, that I don't know, because I saw some cards going in there, but we'll see.
We'll talk about that a bit more coming up in just a sec. Michael Van Der Veen, thank you very much for being here on set with us here in D.C.
Made my day.
Appreciate it. See you soon, I'm sure.
Thanks.
I want to bring in now the aforementioned team of political experts and reporters, specifically, who know this case and this defendant very well. New York Times investigative reporter Suzanne Craig, who's been in the courtroom today. Yep. New York Times Chief White House correspondent Peter Baker, and Vanity Fair special correspondent Brian Stelter is with us. Suzanne, let me start with you. Deference to the person who was there in the overflow room today. This was the toughest questioning that Michael Cohen's faced. We saw, as we've laid out here over the course of this special report, some of those spicy, fiery moments, right? Raised voices, some intensity. What was Cohen's demeanor like? How did you read it as somebody who's been watching him now over the course of the last 3 days?
Well, it's interesting because I was just listening to Michael about it being a good day, and I'd like to sort of step back a little bit and take people into the courtroom.
Please.
And why I think they did land a punch, but I want to put that in context a little bit. I thought Michael Cohen's demeanor, he was cool and calm. I mean, he has been like that throughout. The only time we heard Michael Cohen raise his voice today was on a tape they played from one of his podcasts where he was railing against Donald Trump. But the rest of it, on the stand, jurors saw a composed Michael Cohen. But today, it was interesting. It started the morning session and for hours, and it went on the previous day as well, the last day of testimony, very much trying to impeach Michael Cohen's character. You've seen time and time again, they keep bringing up that he has lied, and it's not minor lies, it's lies under oath. And the suggestion is he's lied under oath before, and now he's under oath and will lie again. It was meandering at times, and you were wondering where they were going with it. I mean, one is they just want to impeach his character. But then we got to this moment today about a phone call that Michael Cohen had made to Keith Schiller, who's Donald Trump's body man. And it was important because that was the call where Michael Cohen had allegedly, Keith Schiller had handed the phone to Donald Trump during this minute and 36-second call and told him that the payment to Stormy Daniels had been made. But what we learned today, and I thought the defense was effective at, is sort of planting in the juror's mind that maybe that call wasn't about Stormy Daniels. That's right. Maybe, in fact, it was about these prank calls that he was getting, these hang-up calls that he was getting where he'd actually allegedly unmasked the person. It was a 14-year-old kid, and Michael threatened to report this to the Secret Service and then called Keith Schiller. I thought it was an effective cross, and I think that they did. It put a dent in him. I think it raised some questions about the nature of the call. But I want to say that it's one call in a pretty thick stack of evidence that Donald Trump's lawyers haven't gone near. They have stated his character. They have not gone to all the other testimony, not just that Michael Cohen has brought in, but other witnesses in the case have backed Michael Cohen up on meetings and on conversations and on records. So I think that Donald Trump's lawyers today probably were happy because they landed a blow at Michael Cohen, but I'm just wondering in the big picture how much it's going to affect what the jury's thinking.
Peter, one of the things you heard from Michael van der Veen, who was just here with us on set, Mr. Trump's former attorney, different case, et cetera, here in Washington, was this idea that he had these Republican surrogates behind him. Surrogates, by the way, is not my word. That is Donald Trump's word. That is what he's called them. You look at the list here. We're going to show it up. 12 Republicans, some of the most conservative in the House of Representatives. Unlike some of the folks that we saw earlier in the week, this didn't feel Veep stakes-y. This felt like a Republican roll call. How do you see it?
Well, it's fascinating because, in fact, it took a while till you got them comfortable with the idea that they should show up in a courtroom.
It was like
and now
Rick
they
Scott,
have, right?
and then it was
and
like
then they all started to join in. They decided they could do it without jumping off a deep end of the pool and worrying about hitting their head. They seem to feel like this is actually not bad for them. It could be good for them. They're going to be currying favor with the guy who's the putative nominee of their party, maybe the next president of the United States, and he's going to remember it. He remembers when you were there. He will specifically remember, for instance, when Mark Meadows' wife continued to campaign for him after the Access Hollywood tape. He brought up all the time. It was a key to Mark Meadows' relationship with the president for a long time. So he is going to know these people. He will know that they are there. He keeps track.
You made an interesting point, Brian. Senator John Fetterman, Democrats have noticed this as well. He called it the Hunger Games of Simp up there in Manhattan today. You made the point, the comparison. Try to imagine if Democratic lawmakers showed up for the trial of Senator Menendez, which is happening right now, or the trial of Hunter Biden, which is set to happen in a couple of weeks from now. Explain that.
It's very hard to imagine that anybody's going to come to the defense of either of those men when we're talking about Democratic elected officials. And I think that speaks to the difference between the Democratic Party right now and the Republican Party. You think about this as another example of norms eroding in the Trump era. There had been an unspoken rule, not entirely, but mostly an unspoken rule that lawmakers stay out of the court system, the judiciary. You let a trial play out, and then you react when the trial is over and the verdict is read. That has been the standard, not every day, but most of the days in Washington and beyond, and we're seeing that norm completely blow up during this Trump trial. And as you said, Peter, not right away, not on day one. It took, what, days 15, 16, 17 of the trial before these lawmakers felt comfortable flying up to D.C.
Well, it's not the first norm that the former president has broken, of course, in his lifetime here. It won't be the last, I doubt it. Suzanne, there's this new poll out today as we talk about the political backdrop of this, because there is one, because as is evidenced by the conversation that Peter and Brian and I are having here on set, the campaign and the legal drama is all one and the same, right? It is a collision course, and this is showing it in the most vivid of ways. Shows former President Trump, President Biden, neck and neck inside the margin of error. Does that sound familiar? Because that's where this race has been for a while now, right? And there's still this really open question of, does this particular case shake anything loose in the minds of voters as we are now getting closer, at least towards maybe the first debate and the Republican convention here?
I'm the worst person to ask this. I just hate polls. So, the poll that matters.
You're welcome to veto it. You're welcome to veto the question, and I'll give it to your colleague, Peter. It's up to you.
No. But I'd like to hear Peter's take on that. But it has been interesting, though, I've got to say, just seeing the collision of the law and politics, like to the idea that they landed, I was listening to Michael's, discussing sort of what a victory this was today. They landed a political victory today. I mean, in court, I thought more so that than one in court. I thought it was an important day for them, but there's just so much other evidence that has gone just completely not addressed at all. And I think the other thing is just thinking that Donald Trump would testify. If he does, it is a political move, pure and simple. There is no reason for this trial. There would be no reason for him to get on the stand. I can't see any upside, but there's a political upside. The gag order is another issue. He can't talk, so he's got his surrogates coming to court. Politics is at play every day here. In the middle of a courtroom. I'm, a reporter who shows up to cover court cases and things like that, and I'm just fascinated to see the politics being infused with it.
And Peter, you're the flip side of that coin. You're a political reporter who's showing up now to do the court piece of it, right? I mean, talk to me how you see that.
Yeah, because this is, in fact, a political event, whether it's intended to be that or not. Obviously, it's not what former President Trump says it is in terms of some sort of ordered by Biden. That's obviously not true. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. But it has such a bearing on our politics because it's happening in the middle of a campaign. And why is it that Trump and Biden agreed to a debate on June 27th yesterday? For Trump, the obvious answer is he may be a convicted felon by that point. And if so, he would like to talk about something other than that. He would like to change the subject. That debate would be an opportunity for him to refocus the conversation on the campaign and the choice between him and Biden rather than talking about his legal issues. Now, he may not be a convicted felon by then. Let's be obvious.
Sure.
We should make sure we allow for that possibility. We don't know what the answer is. And I think that's actually, for politics' sake, that's what still matters. It's the outcome. By the time voters vote, they will know. They will not be focusing on Michael Cohen's testimony or Stormy Daniels' testimony. They're going to say either he's a felon or he's gotten off of the hung jury or an acquittal.
I suspect, though, here's what I want political scientists to figure out this time next year. Did this period of a trial actually help Donald Trump? Did this period of the trial help him in the following way? The coverage of Trump is all about whether he's the victim of a persecution, whether this prosecution is fair or not. Especially in pro-Trump media, that's the storyline every single day.
That's right.
Definitely. Even hearing about the trial, though, no matter what you're watching, what you're reading, it's this sense that Donald Trump, it's all about Trump. It's not about his policies. It's not about his ideas for 2025. It's not about his agenda. It's not about abortion and reproductive rights. The focus is so much on these legal...
It's a little about abortion at some points, right? I mean, it was a few weeks back.
That's true, but I think overall, this narrative may be helping Trump. We're not talking about what he's saying at his rallies, how he's drifting off and talking about Hannibal Lecter. We're focused so much on the legal substance, and for good reason. But I suspect when political scientists study this next year, they'll see maybe Trump was benefiting in the spring from the lack of attention on his plans.
You bring up something interesting, which is this idea that some of the things that Donald Trump touches becomes a spectacle. And Peter, when you and I were covering the White House, I used to cover the White House in 2017 and on during the Trump administration, that was a comparison that happened a lot. It came up a lot, that things would just turn into spectacle land. And I look at the crowds of people lining up to get a seat inside court. $1,800 is not nothing to pay to get a good seat in the front of line so you can guarantee a spot in court for this momentous day. I mean, that is part of it. And you have to wonder that how much Mr. Trump wants to see that. I think he does. I think he wants to see those supporters out there with signs. I think he wants to hear that.
Of course it is. It's all about spectacle. I mean, that's what his whole political career has been about, because that's what his business career was about. Spectacle is what Donald Trump does. It's how he got to where he is. It's his specialty. It's his superpower in some way.
It turns on some people, but it turns off a lot of others. And I still think political burnout, exhaustion, fatigue is the story of our time. There are so many people that don't want to hear about Trump anymore. When they hear about this trial, it just causes them to tune out. Maybe they'll tune in for the verdict, though.
Suzanne Craig, last question to you. Verdict, we think maybe next week, based on the timeline? Realistic?
I'm not thinking verdict next week. Anything's possible. We got closing arguments in that next week, and then they're going to hand it to the jury. So I think we're probably looking that this could go in after the after the long Memorial Day long weekend. But we're going to have closing arguments, it looks like, next week. So it's happening.
But will the jury really want to wait all that long weekend? Won't they want to get this over before the holiday? I guess we'll find out.
I just think scheduling, it's going to be really hard to pack it all in. It may not go to the jury until late next week. Yeah.
Suzanne Craig, Peter Baker, Brian Stelter. Just gives us more of an opportunity to talk. Thank you all for being with us here during our special report. Really appreciate it here. Donald Trump on trial. We're bringing it to you tonight.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.